massive PTR patch today. We're getting roll lock, roll Q, and roll specific SR all at once being worked on the PTR. Liam made a separate video talking about the roll Q system, and what I'm going to talk about is the big balance patch that comes alongside it to try to rebalance the game a bit for a locked 2-2-2 meta. There's a ton of cool hero changes that I want to get to, but the very first patch note is already blowing me away. Global ultimate cost increased by 12%. This does a ton, I'll explain in a sec, but the next one is slowing effects. Instead of stacking together, friendly and enemy slowing effects are now separate, and movement speed will be reduced by whichever is slower. Sounds complicated, let's let the devs explain. Ultimates are now coming up too often, considering how high impact they are. We are reducing how quickly they are built, so less fights will be determined by ultimate usage. The slows change will mostly impact heroes who can slow themselves, such as Widowmaker while scoping or Reinhardt while holding his shield. In these cases, enemy slows such as Symetra turrets or Maze Freeze will not hinder these heroes unless they stop slowing themselves or if the enemy's slow value passes their own slow value. Worded kind of crazy, but quite simply, instead of two slowing effects stacking on top of each other, for example, Reinhardt slows himself down while shielding, you also can get additional slow on top of you if you are walking past a Sim turret or get frozen by Mei while shielding. Now, those effects will no longer stack, meaning that whichever effect is worse, you'll just get that one effect at the time. What percentage speed increase can we expect from this? I don't think it's too much, but it does change Reinhardt's ability to push through chokes against characters like Sim and Mei, with turrets zapping him in his back and a freeze on his side. As a tank player, you know if that's ever happened to you, you essentially stand still. You can't move at all, you're moving so slowly. Now, it seems like enemy slows can still stack together, it's just there won't be a compounded slow if you are slowing yourself for some reason, like Widowmaker scoping up, or Risa while shooting slows down a little bit. This ideally will make tanking feel a bit better to play, at the very least, and at most will make Reinhardt a little bit stronger. But don't worry, Rein players, there is another buff coming up soon, but first I have to explain this global ultimate cost increase. This type of change can affect so many things at once, it can be difficult to even perceive what exactly it is changing, but I'll give you some clues on what to look out for. Characters that have most of their value in their ultimate lose value, and characters that are stronger in the mid-fight gain value. So for example, Mercy doesn't have a very good ult, but her res is kind of an ult, meaning she's more competitive in her tier. Sombra, mid-fight value's decent, but really EMP is where most of her value is. If that charges slower, it might be more competitive to go for a mid-fight style character, like a Sniper or McCree, or simply Tracer, who in many ways Sombra has overtaken in overall value. When the original ultimate change happened, Mercy's res was the best thing in the game because Grav came every single fight. And more importantly, when you used Grav, you would get a lot of your other ults up, meaning that really every fight you had big ults to work with. The GOATS meta looks exactly like this, where you get EMP, you're going to charge a bunch of other ults and just keep chaining them fight to fight, regenerating them really quick. Now what we should see is it become much harder to do that, where your backup ults will charge slower, meaning there'll be bigger gaps where you have to have answers just in the mid-fight, not always having an ult on deck to answer the next upcoming push. Going back to my old example, that's where a character like Ana started to look better, because her ult wasn't as good as res, but her mid-fight value was, and her ult was still pretty good. Those are the kind of heroes that kind of become heroes in the metagame, shining through when one of these big macro changes comes through. Ults matter less, mid-fight matters more, and hopefully cut down on some of the ability power creep that has taken over a bit. Okay, now on to the hero changes. I apologize that section lasted so long. It's a really big change, and maybe the biggest one. But specific hero changes, now we're looking at Ashe, has her reload time per round decreased from 0.3 seconds to 0.25. The devs say Ashe's time to fully reload felt overly restrictive. However, a long reload time is an intended downside to balance out the power of her gun, so we want to be careful not to eliminate that completely. Pulling out my handy calculator, this would mean the time to reload the entire capacity of Ashe's weapon is going from 3.6 full seconds to just 3. Not the biggest change, but definitely helping the fluidity of her playstyle. You notice this increase more on a full reload, but even reloading a couple bullets at a time will feel a bit better. Now onto the big one. Brigitte gets all manner of changes. Okay, don't jump out of your seat just yet. Some of these look insane, but The important theme here is she's more of a healer and less of a personal tank, much easier to kill now. Let's go through it. Self-healing from Inspire now is increased from 100 to 130. Remember, that number is distributed over the course of 6 seconds, meaning that the buff is going from 16.67 health per second to now 21.6, totaling in 130 over the course of the whole duration. But since you can keep chaining it back together to have it have almost a continuous effect if you keep landing flails, I think it's better to really focus on that healing per second number. But the healing on herself is halved, meaning she gets 10 health per second where she used to get 16. Just like everybody else. Repair Pack's getting a crazy rework. It now has 3 charges. The healing goes up to 150, but now heals over 2 seconds instead of instantly. Really big deal that is. It being an instant cast made it a mini nano boost. Now the heal over time will make it feel like an Ana healing dart, though more potent. The notes say if you throw multiple packs at the same person, the current duration will be extended by 2 seconds. So it's important to remember that you can't just triple pack a Genji blade. Well, you can, but the healing effect will be distributed 1 second at a time, not in a big burst. But that's still pretty good if you think about it, and it'll be interesting how this armor pack tech plays out, considering it's supposed to be able to give you over health. Now, if I'm putting my thinking cap on, I think this means the armor component of the health will take a little bit of a nerf, whereas the healing portion of it will get a bit of a buff. Because think about it, when you're in a fight as a tank, or as we showed with the Shanghai Dragons winning the Stage 3 finals in my other video, Ding's Pharah was the target for armor pack oftentimes. Squishy characters really loved being able to get the over health, whereas tanks you definitely want to get the healing health because they already have natural armor anyway. But since it's a heal over time now, that means it'll be much harder for the repair pack to work up to that over heal capacity where it starts to give you armor. In some cases, this will make it better, but in other cases, maybe worse. Because when you're in the fight, you're more likely to continuously get damage. So the way I think it'll work is it'll be better on tanks who take a lot more chip damage over time, and you can queue up a couple armor packs in advance even if you want, but it won't be as impactful in squishy duels because it used to be you put it on your Pharah or Genji or whomever, and all of a sudden they're like not just fully healed, but also have a bit of armor. That really swings their DPS duels. Certainly helps DPS, but there's a lot of damage thresholds that can burst through it, right? What made armor pack better before is that the big burst of health would bail you out. Like they'd use their best cooldown on your damage, armor pack saves them, shake it off, get in there. Well, now armor pack works much differently. More changes. Whip shot. Outgoing velocity increased from 60 to 80. This means it'll be a lot easier to activate Inspire from range. That's pretty important. And the retracting time was reduced from 0.6 seconds to 0.3, meaning that baby's going out and coming back basically instantly. This is going to feel really good for Brigitte players and simply just make her crowd control playstyle even stronger. It was already pretty darn good, but down here at the bottom of the patch notes is where things get a little troublesome for Brig players, where her barrier shield health has been reduced from 500 down to a measly 200. Praise Jeff Kaplan, I've been asking for this change for what feels like forever. Now, between this and her self-healing, she will feel like a squishy support character that you have to play carefully, but still pretty lethal and a strong healer. Other changes are her shield bash stun duration has been reduced from 0.9 seconds to 0.75. For a comparison, McCree's stun is listed as stunning for 0.7 seconds. It was always kind of funny that Brig's stun was better than his all this time, but it still is slightly, but much more in line. And the last nerf is her ultimate cost increased by 10%. Now, keep in mind, her healing is far better now as well, so the ultimate might feel like it charges the same amount. And potentially, she could even get it faster. It's kind of hard to know the metrics of how this is going to project outwards, depending on how good you are at Brig, until we actually get in and start testing the hero. But these changes are really interesting. There's parts of it I love, there's parts of it I'm worried about, but at the very least, we've moved Brigitte away from the unkillable nightmare she used to be. She'll still somewhat be that when she has Rally active, but other than that, she's a bit more of a healer, brawler. Her whip shot's easier to use, which I think is really important for a lot of players who felt like she wasn't strong enough in 2-2-2. I think high skill players that always landed whip shot didn't feel that way at all. So now that that's a bit easier, she'll be a bit more accessible to support players. I love playing Brig. I'm excited to play her as an actual support and see how this goes. If she is indeed good enough, there is a chance that we get a 2-2-2 variant of GOATs, where we get Ryan, Zarya, Brig, and, I don't know, maybe Lucio? Maybe a different main heal? Remember, Blizzard has tried to drop nuclear bombs on GOATs comp before, but like cockroaches and Keith Richards, GOATs comp has survived everything. Moving on to more changes, Doomfist Quick Melee no longer pauses ammo reload, making his character a bit more fluid. They've already made multiple fluidity changes to his kit. This goes along with it. And I think it's a good direction to go for the character. Rather than simply making him more impactful, allowing him to stay in the fight longer makes him more viable without him being more oppressive. So a good direction to go. Hanzo's Storm Arrow ammo now reduced from 6 to 5. The devs say the overall damage output of Storm Arrows was too high, and we're reducing the maximum number of shots. I don't know if this even does anything other than maybe changing who's best at shield break. Hanzo spamming Storm Arrows from miles away was one of the best shield break tactics because it's so accurate and had so much damage. Is losing one shot or 70 damage of that change that fact? Probably not. And realistically, to get a kill with Storm Arrows, you only need a few of them anyway. And often I felt you didn't even need to spam them all out and probably shouldn't. You probably should just line up your shots and shoot them carefully. So having extra more so was for shields or tank characters that are easy to hit. And I still think 5 is quite a lot of those. So I don't know if this changes Hanzo significantly in any way. Still a really strong DPS character. Next change up to Moira, Fade can now be used while stunned, which I think is the only ability in the game like this. The devs say Moira has always been good at healing and dealing damage, but she offers very little utility compared to the other healers. This change reinforces her evasive nature and allows her to potentially save her team from area stuns such as Reinhardt's Earth Shatter. Really interesting stuff. This means look out for characters like Brig, Roadhog, McCree, obviously Earth Shatter as stated here. Anything that stuns you, well, Moira now just doesn't care. As long as you have Fade up, you can use it in response, which will be interesting if that means she's utilized more in the bunker meta, where she actually could just tank Halt Hook combos by herself and counter them with a Fade press. Pretty important considering we're probably still in a bunker meta even after this patch, so keep on a lookout for that being a thing. Next up, a nerf to Orisa. The cooldown of her protective barrier has been increased from 8 seconds to 9. The devs say a common point of feedback for playing against Orisa was that it doesn't feel useful to shoot the barrier as it comes back so quickly. Increasing the cooldown of protective barrier will make destroying them a bit more rewarding. I agree with the devs are saying here. I don't know if 1 second is enough though. A big problem for Orisa in the balance of the game right now is that you kind of need triple damage in order to both break the barrier and still have the firepower to capitalize on that, or you just have to flank the barrier and ignore it completely. That's sort of the problem right now. Now that you're only locked to 2 damage dealers, although Roadhog has pretty good barrier bust from range, outside of that, there's a lot of comps that are going to struggle to even challenge Orisa's barrier. I actually don't think 1 second is enough, but only time will tell. It may require some of the other tank heroes to get buffed, like perhaps everybody's favorite shield bearer Reinhardt, who now has a new passive called Steadfast. Reduces knockback effects by 30%. Saw this coming from a mile away. The developers comment, as a frontline melee range tank, Reinhardt was more adversely affected by knockback abilities than most heroes. To reduce some of this frustration and enable Reinhardt to more easily fulfill his role, he is now more resistant to being knocked back. The only problem I have with this is I think Orisa's Halt will still probably work exactly the same because it pulls you towards a spot. It'll be interesting if he's like heavy now and it only takes him part of the way. That's pretty self-explanatory. A third of their distance will be cut back, making Wrecking Ball, Pharah, Lucio, and another 100 characters in the game that knock Reinhardt around slightly less effective against him. Is this enough? It'll be interesting. I know, for example, Orisa's Halt slows down your momentum, which makes me curious to test out if that self-slow effect and the stacking of slows in the earlier patch does more for Reinhardt than this even does, or some combination of the two of them. It'll take some testing on the PTR, but I'm kind of just assuming Reinhardt still is a bit power creeped by the other main tank offerings right now. Next up, Sombra's hack duration on enemy players is reduced from 6 to 5. Keep in mind that's just the manual hack. It says nothing about the EMP, which should still be 6 seconds long when it hits you. But there is an EMP nerf as well, where the activation time is increased from half of a second to 0.65 seconds. The developers say, hack is a potent disable with a long duration. Reducing the duration slightly will make it feel less oppressive as the hacked player without reducing its effectiveness too greatly. The increased cast time of EMP allows for more time to react and opens up more counterplay for the opposing team. Yeah, I think this is fair. I know a lot of people are really skittish around Sombra nerfs because she plays so poorly in ranked, but there's a reason why pure game sense characters really struggle in the ranked environment, and I'll just let you do the math on that one. Sombra is an incredible character when you learn how to play her, even in ranked, but there's just sort of a skill cliff to playing heroes that require teamwork out of you to be able to sync with your team perfectly. Sombra's a bit tricky for ladder play, balancing that way. Next up, Symetra got a whole bunch of changes. It now lasts an infinite duration, but you can destroy it yourself. The cooldown for it starts when teleporter is destroyed, and also the cooldown is increased from 12 seconds to 15, but the maximum range of it goes up by 5 meters. Now you can teleport 30 meters away, and the teleporter breaks if the entrance is more than 40 meters from the exit, which I think only happens then if you put it on a moving platform or something like that. And now teleporter reuse time has been increased from 1 to 1.5 seconds. That's really important because those little aggro plays where you pop up behind the team, then escape out immediately, there'll be a bigger window of time to punish if you're going for backline shenanigans like that. The developers say Symetra's teleporter is an interesting tool, but often felt too restricting to use. Making the teleporter last forever opens up some new opportunities for how Symetra is used in various maps and group compositions. Yeah, no kidding. If you're able to set up a infinite loop, being able to jump from high ground to high ground until the enemy destroys it, well, there's some high grounds where the line of sight is just inaccessible to where the teleporter is until they like wrap around or send dive characters up there. That change and the range change is very significant. Yes, there's other nerfs onto it to sort of decrease how effective it is, but I think those two changes really change how it's used. I mean, just think about being able to leave a teleporter for your Ana to go up to high grounds and back down again continuously. That's actually really insane. Sym was already a pretty strong character in ranked, although a bit gimmicky. Now I think the teleporter tactics will be more reliable to pull off, and a bit less all in on a couple edge cases. Next we got Tracer. Pulse Bomb damage increased from 300 to 350. Guys, pull out your Robin Williams "what year is it" memes. The developers say Pulse Bomb was reduced in power some time ago to make sure it was not overly punishing to tanks, which are much easier to stick the bomb to. While this is still a goal, we're restoring some of its lost power to help deal with other hefty targets such as Bastion or enemies with bonus armor from Brigitte. Yeah, great idea. Just as Goat's meta is dead, we're making sure that she can pulse bomb Brigitte with rally armor. Let's not look a gift horse in the mouth. Moving on. This is the last one. Wrecking Ball's minefield now has an increased projectile speed from 10 to 13, causing the mines to spread out more. This makes it easier to create a wider minefield, especially from high in the air, and also reduce the activation time of the mines from 0.25 seconds to 0.1 basically instantly. I already thought the mines were insane. Now they're super insane. The devs say Wrecking Ball has a very active playstyle, but it often feels difficult to make good use out of his ultimate. This change allows him to spread out his minefield further if he wants, while still allowing for a tighter cluster if he activates it near the ground. Keep in mind, the whole cluster thing, I'm guessing that means the mines ejecting from Wrecking Ball going up first before they fall, because if they fall to the ground faster, that means they're arming faster as well, which I don't think is what they mean, but it could be. In any case, they arm faster when they're on the ground too, but if they hit the ground faster because they move faster, that's also another way to make them a whole lot stronger, but we'll have to test out the implications of this. I already thought Wrecking Ball was one of the best characters right now. Only really second place to Orisa and bunker that has a lot of stuns anyway, making ball hard to play, but he's also probably one of the only tanks you can play against bunker, and a lot of that doesn't seem like it's going to change. Okay, what a massive role lock update. We'll have to cover this more as it develops. I would be surprised if there wasn't more patches throughout the time period of the role queue being tested on the PTR, but we will need to get some playtime and data to see all this stuff pans out. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Are we still in the bunker meta? Probably. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for your Overwatch. See you guys next time.